yesterday was the 48th attempt to repeal what they call Obamacare. Rather than the 48th attempt to try to improve and make the law stronger, make it work for citizens, fix the anomalies that exist within the legislation. After all, this is a Heritage Foundation idea successfully piloted by a Republican governor with a Democratic-controlled General Assembly in Massachusetts. People can work together to do this. And here's the key. This holds the key to us driving down the national debt. The American healthcare delivery system, with 44 million people that didn't have insurance, with all the discrepancies and all the discrimination that we described earlier, is also 18.6% of the gross domestic product of the country. It is the most inefficient business model in the world. Now, if we were able to take that 18.6% and drive those costs down to under 14, we would eliminate the national debt, we would flatline our debt going forward, we would be able to expand Medicare instead of talking about vouchering it, and we would put people back to work with a new emphasis being on patient outcomes and patient wellness. The good news about the Affordable Care Act is that's what it sets out to do, and that's where it's already heading. And if there was any semblance of cooperation and help, we would be well on the way. But it may take another election cycle for people to decide whether or not they think, well, you know what, I may not like every aspect of this bill, but geez, I think they ought to work together to make it work stronger for the country than pull it apart.
Okay, let's look at the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, I went back and I looked at our previous interview that we had 3 years ago when this whole thing was coming at us like a freight train. And I looked at you and I said, Congressman Larson, actually I said, John. I said, John, how many different things can you do with this thing? You can pass it, you can modify it, or you can kill it. And I said, clearly, I know you're not wanting to kill it. I'm not so sure there are many people who do. You came down on the side of, you did not say, you said, Jim, look it. There are flaws in this thing. Now, we have to modify it. Now, the other side of this thing from the layman, John, looking at this thing from the outside, is very few bodies of legislation get passed with 2,600 pages worth of stuff, right? And 20,000 pages of regulations that follow it. All right, with the Speaker of the House, who at the time I know you were discouraging from saying this, said, we're going to have to pass it in order to find out what's in it. Wait, let me finish now, John, because I mean, I gave you your opportunity, right? So here's the thing. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of the things that you talked about are admirable, they're well-intentioned, and they're good things to do. Like the pre-existing conditions and some of the other things you're talking about. We should have that, and there's no question, as a person who sits on the board of directors as a hospital, that we've got to get the costs under control. Having said that, John, right? I mean, the reality of it is there's no such thing as a free lunch. Right. And you and I both know it. So if you're going to give people pre-existing conditions which are good, if you're going to give people things like preventative care, which is good, but use the words free that come along with it, you and I know better. Now, the other thing is that, I mean, that upsets me as a person watching this who likes some of the things you're going after is I just sat down and it came right off the top of my head. Whether it's the website or the security or some of the policies or the structure of the law, I mean, this thing has got a long way to go. And one of the things that...
So did Social Security, so did Medicare, and now so will the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, but John, I agree with you.
Go back and check what people said about Social Security and Medicare.
I agree with you, right? Yeah. The difference in the society today versus 50 years ago is that the same amount of patience and publicity doesn't go along with it, right? And the other thing is that...
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And the other thing is that when people are saying, and I understand the math of what you're saying, that this is going to take things down. I think $1.3 trillion in savings over 20 years, that comes up to something like $65 billion a year.
How about the fact that there's $700 to $800 billion annually by more than 10 different independent associations in inefficiencies, waste, and abuse. The whole act over 10 years is $954 billion. That's why I'm saying by driving out the inefficiencies on an annual basis, not 20 years down the road, annually, you start to both drive down the cost of healthcare delivery. Now, this isn't me. This is Mark Bertolini, the chairman of the Aetna. These are independent sources. This is Clayton Christensen out of Harvard, an economist that says what was needed in the healthcare system is a disruptive system so that we could get after all the inefficiencies that everybody experiences. You're on a hospital board. You know the kind of complaints you get in terms of
And I
one
know
wing
the
to the other.
inefficiencies.
And so, but hospitals are moving in this pattern now, and they're moving aggressively. So are insurance companies moving in this area. The thing that we need is the government to pull together. Now listen, let's be honest about it. We had, the Republicans dug in and said, listen, we do not want to see this act pass. You go back and check the history on it. Remember, Grassley was all in favor of this act. This bill resembles more of what Grassley's input than certainly Democratic input from the left. It's more of a balance in the program. But then they made a calculated political decision to say, we're going to oppose this bill and continue to do so. With all the problems that we're going through, do you think that 48 times to repeal a bill that at its core does far more good, notwithstanding its problems that it has and the inequities that exist within the bill, but fix them? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. To your point, those issues of pre-existing conditions, discrimination, 44 million fellow Americans without insurance, hospitals being overwhelmed in their room, and absent that, who pays for the hidden tax that is passed on to citizens every single day by way of premium increase without the Affordable Care Act?
John, I see that you've had this discussion before. We need to move on. But let me make
That's true.
my friend, let me make the last point, right? While I think you are making a lot of good points, I come from the school of thought that there ain't no such thing as everybody is absolutely right. And when a Republican's sitting in that chair and starts blaming everything on the Democrats, I look at them and say, don't you sit there and tell me that every problem you have is because of the Republicans or the Democrats.
Right.
It's just not right. I mean, the reality of it is we are where we are because somebody came up with the idea that we can throw in 2,600 pages of legislation and 20,000 pages of regulation
Why
and
is
it's
there
going to work.
26,000? Why is there that many pieces of legislation?
John.
Why? But why? I mean, let's talk about that logically.
But let's not take too long
I
because we
won't
got
take
a long
too
way to
long,
go.
but so what is the bill? It wasn't a single payer bill. It was a bill that built on what we had existing already. So you had to take the hodgepodge network of healthcare delivery that we have, then take the existing code and layer on top of that so that even a sentence change to the law changes volumes of pages, et cetera. But if you look at what the law is set out to do and accomplish, is to provide for those people and intersect in the various agencies, most notably Medicaid and Medicare, and keep it within the private sector system. Which I get a kick out of the fact that the decriers of it say that it's socialism. Can you point to an area of that bill that's socialized? This follows the tenets of the free enterprise system. It establishes, and even over the objection of those who want people, we wanted to put even a payer system where the state or the government could put forward its own plan, but that couldn't even pass. And so it's a free choice, and I think you're going to see people participating even at a greater extent. And if we could, to your point, get both sides to work together to perfect this bill, we can drive down this national debt. That's what holds the key. That's the most inefficient. Paul Ryan and I will both agree that the most inefficient costs in our economy today are driven by health care costs.
Well, we're going to end this part of the discussion, John, by saying that we have some agreement, but we have some honest differences of opinion.